Blessings, Quantum Family. It's Jules, and I am super excited about our guest today. This is somebody new that has come into my life, and we just had just a really short conversation. So I already know that this is going to be amazing. So I have Sean Stone with me today. And Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you and just let us hear a little bit about you, what you want to share today.
Sure. I think that we connected because we're both very much on spiritual journeys. Mine has, I would say, my spiritual awakening, I would say, started probably at 10 years old, and going. My dad took me to like India and Tibet, and Nepal, in and that when I was 10 and back in 95, and he introduced me to these concepts about the third eye and meditation practices. And I didn't start meditating until I was probably about 15, but have made it a daily practice ever since then. And so I work in media, I work in film and documentary, but for me, I always tell people, like, spirituality has to undergird everything that you're doing, right? And it's the ethos of a spiritual being that's going to come through. Whether you're watching their film, whether you're listening to them speak, you can tell that this person is more connected to their spirit, to the divine, right? That's working through us, that we're not disconnected. And not to say perfectly connected, but like we are more aware of this connection and working to share it, spread the word, and hopefully elevate consciousness through the discourse.
I love that. So, what I was picking up on, where I feel like a nice place to bring the conversation is that, I feel like, especially right now, spirituality has become almost like fad, right? It's like, oh, I do this and I do this. But the real, living it and bringing it into every aspect. It's not just something you do in the morning. It's not just something you do at yoga. It's not just something you do during a class, that you integrate it into every part of your life. So I'm going to turn that over to you and just share your wisdom around that.
How do you integrate into every part of your life? I mean, even when in relationship or friendship or business, or right, all these things, when we're triggered, when we're anxious, when we're angry, um, it's funny how there's like this expectation that if you're teaching in the spiritual arts, or if you have spiritual teachings, that somehow people have like there's an expectation of infallibility, or this person can't be triggered or can't be angry. And it's like, no, that's not what spirituality means. Spirituality means that we don't get angry. It's just that hopefully we're more conscious of our triggers and what is causing us to anger. We're able to hopefully be better communicators, maybe not in the moment, but maybe more quickly able to resolve a conflict, right? To like mediate and say, okay, that I felt the anger, it passed through me, I'm not going to attach to it, right? That's, to me, like the essence of spirituality is not attaching so much to the ego. So not to say that we don't have ego. It's part of why we're here, I believe, in this world. I believe we're here for the purpose of experiencing through this body, right? This vessel, this technology that is the human body, which is a technology. And the more you work, as you know, with different practices that incorporate, and how do you say, they incorporate breath techniques and movements, right? Visualizations, the more you start to like recognize, okay, the physical body is tied completely, not and always, to our energy body, to our astral body. Um, so it's like, even in dream, we're still working through the vessel of these bodies to travel through our dream states and activate and access aspects of our consciousness that may be beyond our limited, awakened, like, let's say, our limited waking mind, right? We have a certain level of consciousness when we're awake, but when we actually start to relax and put the brain to sleep, in a sense, or even using psychedelics, hallucinogens, plant medicine, it's like you start to slow, to basically start to slow the brain so you can start to access that consciousness that connects all of us, right? That's what we're all tuned into, is how life exists on this planet. So it's all a spiritual experience. We may not always recognize it as such. We may be like, oh no, that's the bad, that's the disconnected, that's the evil. And it's like, well, those are all masks. Those are all still masks of God. Those are all still aspects of God. They may be lower vibrationally, lower frequency, maybe not in alignment with where you are right now, maybe bad medicine, but there's still something to, there's something that connects us to it, because if it's in your consciousness, you're connected to it. And that's to say, like, everything is still connected to the oneness. So how can we learn from these so-called, negative states, bad experiences, the angers, the pains, the suffering of ego? It's hopefully to recognize, make us recognize, okay, we don't have to attach so much weight to the ego, because ultimately we know this realm is temporary. So it's really just for our learning purposes as a soul, our education as a soul.
Beautiful. There's so much that was coming through as you were talking. First of all, I love that you recognize the body as a technology, because that's such a huge part of my work, and that this technology is really that it's the you say it's the frequency of source, and that we have a divine technology that is our higher operating system, if you will. So many of us are looping in the distorted operating system, which is created through programming. But we have this multidimensional body that we can move into to experience what our body is beyond that, and that there's an intelligence there. And I love also how you were bringing in just judging the good and bad. And I, I go to this place where if we're judging good and bad, boom, stop. It's like, right then you're running a program, right? It's like we don't even have to run it all the way. We just have to immediately like catch it in that first awareness of, oh, I'm in a program. And then we start to shift into that divine operating system. And yeah, okay, so easily said and done, but that's part of the practice. I think going back to our original question, if you will, is bringing spirituality into every part of our life. And I feel like such a huge part of that is awareness of what we're agreeing to and what we're running. And I call it, we call it the matrix, I call it the God sphere is sometimes what I call it. Like within the God sphere, everything is still of God, but we're in observation. And when we're observing a God, then we're observing through a program. But when we break out of the God sphere, we start to attune our consciousness into the intelligence beyond observation, and we have a completely different experience. And I feel like that's where we're all evolving to. And so now I feel like, where do we want to go with this? Because we were talking a little bit about relationships and before we got through. And I feel like that's just, I don't know. I was telling you that's kind of where my calling is to go into next, is evolving the relationship. So let's bring that same question of spirituality in everyday life, but using it in reflection of a relationship.
Mm. I think we should get to that, but I wanted, before we get into that, I feel like there's a couple of things we should reflect on with what you were talking about in how, like what you were talking about, the assimilation of this knowledge. So a lot of people may have heard the term gnosis, like, not, it's like the Gnostics talked about this. It was like a knowing. It's like where faith meets knowing, where you have a direct experience of the knowledge, right? And a gnosis and a relationship with that knowledge. And so I think that what we as beings are evolving towards, being more intuitive to our gnosis, right? Of spirit, of our souls, of what's needed for us. And speaking of the technology, I mean, just because we're coming out of a few years where a lot of people in the so-called spiritual community were the first to line up and basically get get the experimental vaccines, force other people to get the experimental vaccines, right? To line up to basically, say, like, don't trust your immune system, don't work with the technology that is your body, right? This divine thing that has been evolved for millions, if not billions of years, and is connected to a higher power that operates it, because we're not here just we're here by divine spirit. We're not just here because of a random chance encounter between a bundle of amino acids and electricity. It's like, it's like there's something obviously much higher in consciousness. So the fact that a lot of spiritual people were so happy to embrace the collectivist idea that, well, it's for the greater good. And for the greater good, I will sacrifice my sovereignty of body, of spirit, of knowing, my own innate knowing, to be like, yes, the doctors must be followed, the science must be followed. This is really interesting to me, right? So going to like, this whole idea of like the spiritual ones that were at like, Bhakti Fest had like vaccine mandates, it's like, what in the world was going on? All these yogis, right? And these yoga instructors and yoga studios and stuff. It's like, what's going on? And then those of us that were saying, listen, there are conspiracies here that are very real, and to like that question of like judgment. So one can discern. None of us is God, so we can't, like, that's where I think judgment is a very powerful word. Like when I think of judgment, I think of like a soul. Like who can weigh the soul? That's not for any of us as humans who are going through this experiment to be the ones weighing people's souls. But we can discern, and we can discern choices, and we can discern, hey, this is a negative path, right? This is a negative choice. And for, let's say, now negative can also be positive. Like negative choices oftentimes, even if you don't make it through this lifetime, you might learn it in the next lifetime, right? It'll come back around eventually. You will have to suffer the consequence of that negative choice. And in suffering the consequence, you'll grow, you'll learn. Again, it may take lifetimes, but that's why negative is not evil. Negative is just negative. Negative leads to consequence that will in the long term also become positive, right? So it's like it really is a balance in yin yang of, like that darkness will, give way to light, and vice versa. The light that becomes too bright becomes dark. It's a balance. So we can't sit here and go like, well, that path is evil and it's the end all be all. It's like, no, it may lead to destruction, chaos, death, but that's not the end all be all, because there is no death. Spiritual people understand this. Spiritual people are not afraid of death. So just going to like what to me is like people that are more tuned to spirituality are not afraid of death because they know it's not the end. So you can't threaten them and be like, well, we're going to take away your life. It's like, no, you can't. Okay, my life exists before before my parents conceived me, and it will exist after my life on this planet ends. So yeah, so as far as like the decision, the discernment, the choices during the last few years, a lot of us who are kind of starting to explain to people, look, there's choices to be made here because there's a lot of multidimensional forces that are at work. And you can call them like more, more negative, dark, low frequency, if you want to, demonic, if you want to say, like these are choices that we are collectively making, and we are falling into traps as a result collectively. And we need to start to discern if we want to, to actually raise our vibration. That's a choice of discerning. It's just like whether you're going to, eat some GMO glyphosate riddled food, or you want to choose, living food that's, that actually that's not been poisoned, that has vitality, that will nourish you, right? That's just a choice. There's going to be a consequence to those two choices. And it's funny how like so many people started to say, oh, well, that's conspirituality. Those of us that were like saying, use discernment and recognize that there's other forces that are at work here trying to manipulate us and manipulate our choices for agendas. And so for us to become sovereign, assertive, divine beings that we are, and to like assert our sovereignty, to be able to discern, a healthier choice, a healthier world, a better, there's obviously better realities that we could be experiencing collectively. But to say that was to be like to be buying into a conspirituality. Oh yeah, you believe in it's conspiracy meets spirituality. And it's like, yeah, because when you understand like that this is a spiritual war that's been going on for eons, and it is very much temptation and exploration, and low frequency beings trying to attach to you, trying to lower your vibration, right? Trying to basically drain you of your energy, because we are these, again, when you're like a living thing that is energized by source, that light attracts all kinds of things that want to feed off that light, right? That's like in the Matrix, we're batteries. Of course, the parasite, the machines will want to feed off the battery that is the human. So yeah, guess
Oh
what?
my gosh.
There are interdimensional conspiracies in a sense to manipulate the human. Then it's funny how like how many of like the spiritual ones that kind of I feel like are more to manipulate others. That's how I kind of look at it at heart is like, what is your agenda? Do you want to manipulate other people? Do you want to sell them on your course? Do you want to sell them on your book? Do you want to sell them on you're a guru, you're so smart, you know what, like you want to sell them on something? Or are you simply there to offer your wisdom? And those that want to receive it, it's like, you're free to receive it. Sometimes of course it's not free. You can exchange energy, you can pay for it, but like, you're there basically to offer your teachings, your insight, your wisdom, but you're not there just to manipulate others to make you to ascend you into a higher place. And there's a lot of spiritual who are like in that messianic false messiah template, right, who are all about themselves and manipulating others to make themselves feel bigger, seem bigger, have more control, all that.
Gosh, there's so many places we can go with all of this. And okay, so there's two things. First, I feel like there's an invitation, right? This invitation of I have this thing is like just turn it inside out, like what's on the other side, right? It's like, okay, this is what we're seeing. These are all the storylines. This is all this. But we have to remember that it's still the illusion, just like you were saying. It's like no matter what illusion we're tapping into, it's still a level of the illusion. And in that, we can remember, okay, am I going to experience this from a state of a victimhood, or am I going to experience this from a space of always attuning my consciousness above what I'm seeing, because I know if I'm seeing it through a program, and I always have somewhere else to go. And so if I'm always attuning my consciousness to an intelligence beyond what I can see, I can't get locked into that victimhood and create storylines around blah 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 blah. And also I feel like we're not looking for the answer or the truth outside of ourselves. It forces us to consistently go into our heart space, and like you were saying, that knowingness, it's the remembering. It's like, oh, okay, this one intelligence is running through all of us, and we're all going to have our own way of hearing it, and especially we're all going to be in different levels of frequency and attuning our consciousness from whatever frequency we're in. But when it all comes down to it, it's saying the same thing. We're just hearing it differently because it's going through our filters and that sort of thing. But I feel like the more that we start to speak from our truth, and we learn that the truth, regardless of what's being said around us, can only be discerned between our individual consciousness and how close we are to the intelligence that's within us. And from there, nothing else really matters. I don't know. It's like, because that's the way we change the world. It's like, where are we focusing our attention? Are we focusing it on our divine truth, or are we getting locked into stories and creating timelines around them? And I mean, quantum physics has already proven what we focus on becomes our reality. And I feel like all of these distractions are that's all they are. And if we can just see them as distractions, as a reminder of, oh, I just got distracted. Let's go back here. Let's go
Yeah.
back here. And okay, so then you were saying, what were you? Oh, at the end about, I feel like that the same thing is true when we're listening to, spiritual gurus, if you will, or the people that are speaking. We can go to that same place of, when I hear this person, is it sparking a place where I remember? Or am I is like an emotional trigger? Because I feel like that when we're hitting an emotional trigger, it's a good indicator that we're either looking for the answer outside of ourselves. Ooh, this person has the answer, and we get all excited, right? Or is it that the delivery system is created for manipulation, and it's creating an emotional response? And usually those emotional responses are either you're going to miss out, or I forget, I don't know, like you get excited for the change.
Yeah.
Oh, this person is the answer to my problems kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. Well, um, there's a couple of things that you touched upon that I wanted to comment on.
I know, I feel like we should just be like interact.
All right, before the emotional trigger, do you remember the point that you made right before
Oh,
that?
I was talking about the answer of the remembering is that sovereignty between consciousness and the divine. Was
Yes.
that it? Yes.
And so, but so when it comes to like emotional trigger, I think that emotional triggers are all indicative. Oh, I know you were talking about before distractions. I look at it a little differently. I look at it like, okay, the emotional trigger is if someone gets excited, like if you get excited, it's not a bad thing. It's not a say like it's a question of how you use that excitement. And this is maturity, right? It's like, when you're like young and you get excited and you're like, let me give everything to you, right? Let me give you all my energy. Let me give you all my attention, right? And then you go through life and you're like, well, no, actually, like, I mean, I can be excited, I can like the connection, but I'm gonna meet you halfway. If you can't meet me halfway, I'm not gonna go and throw my energy at you. I'm not gonna try to take care of you. I'm not gonna try to like, beg. I mean, all that energy, right? Of the young puppy, right? That's looking for affection, that's looking for attention, that's looking for love, right? That's just a different stage.
Yeah.
So the actual like the intention is beautiful. The puppy wants to be loved, but if someone can't meet you halfway, if someone, becomes your all, you've lost yourself. So this is the path that we're all walking. Some people are just, have matured more quickly. It depends how many lifetimes they've worked at it. Some people are just getting into their spiritual practice. Others have been working on this for, 10,000 lifetimes. I don't know. It's just where you are with your journey, right? But but the goal is to not, to if you not to completely lose yourself. Like when you surrender, you submit your energy, like submission is very important in practices like Islam. And it's like, but that's the submission to God, to the higher power, right? And even there, I would say don't lose your own internal guide. Don't let someone else become the voice of God. Don't let a mullah, don't let a cleric, don't let
Yeah.
a rabbi, don't let a president, don't let a politician, don't let a lawyer, don't let a judge, don't let, like the guy on TV. Doesn't matter. Don't let the guy on the internet become the voice of God. Don't lose your internal compass. And so that goes to like we were talking about with distractions. I look at everything as reflecting my consciousness. And so it's like, okay, if my conscience and my attention is being drawn here, rather than judge it and be like, that's a distraction, just recognize, okay, what is the deeper meaning? What
Mm.
is the energy here? And if it's not nourishing me, this kind of goes to it. Like if it's not nourishing me, if I'm not learning something through it, if I'm not figuring something out about myself with this exchange, this interaction, because everything is an interaction, right? There is no victimhood. There's literally a choice of how I'm going to interact, right? If I want to play that role, well, you can play that role of victim. It's not a rewarding role. It won't fulfill you. It won't empower you, right? So it's like, how do I, in this exchange, how do I learn? What am I getting out of this? What am I, receiving, learning, growing through it? And at a certain point, if you feel like something's not nourishing you, it's time to then perhaps move your attention. And this kind of goes to the relationship question you wanted to get into, and how much relationships, as we know, are this dance of like the yin yang of this mutual support, where like, the left has to support the right and they have to have like compatibility. So there's compromise, but it shouldn't be like you're feeling complete, like you can't be yourself.
Mhm.
And even dark, as we know, like our dark side, if it doesn't say people have to love our dark side, but being able to feel seen for that dark side, to maybe work through it, to feel love there, to feel safe there for both parties. It's like, I don't know if the relationship will last if there is not that feeling of, again, this, mutual support.
I feel like you nail it on the head, but there's something I want to back up and just
Mhm.
bring because I feel like this is so important is when obviously everything that in our life is a reflection and how we're using that reflection, even if this is a relationship, like where we're going. But I love how you used the word what, because I feel like so many people go to the why and they go searching for a story to back up their experience, which just like it does, the why doesn't change anything, right? But when we're looking at what, like what information is this showing me, it gives us a choice so that we can move beyond it. And I just wanted to honor you in that space because it's so huge and I don't want people to bypass like how powerful what you just said was. And so now bringing that into a relationship, if it's not why and it's what, we shift it to just observing what information is there, because with information we have choice, and in that choice with the reflection of two people, you're always elevating to the next. And it could be as simple as like in an insecurity, let's say, or there's a place of fear, and just being able to recognize, oh, I'm being triggered by a behavior, and I don't need to know why I have the trigger. I just need to know that I have it. And then I can focus on the solution of moving myself out of that programmed reality into a new one. And when two people are doing that together, it amplifies the experience to a place where the relationship itself is being uplifted, the two people are being uplifted, and it does take a commitment. And I think that's what we were talking about before, is to finding somebody that is willing to be within that commitment, even in a space where they are triggered, to commit to what the initial commitment was, is to always identify the what and choose a solution or the frequency to move into and have that experience together. Because I feel like that initial place is probably the golden space. Not that you couldn't do it on your own, I think you could, but it would just be your own experience of that and probably not one with the other. And that's why when you ended it like this, I was like, yes, because you can
Mhm.
do it on your own, but to do it together just is so much more amazing.
Rewarding. I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, they always, they say that there's, that we are mirrored out, as you know, we are mirrored most through our relationships, right? Because that's where, you get called for your bullshit, right? Whatever it is, whether it's bad, whether it's your bad behavior, whether it's your uh um triggers, your anger, but also you get to experience your joy together. You get to experience, share, you get to share these amazing experiences together. And that leads you to that choice point of being like, okay, look, it's a choice. Is every relationship's going to have its bullshit. Every relationship's going to have its annoyances and its frustrations and its pain, right? And it's like it's bad. But the choice is always, are you moving forward towards a future that is, that based in the idea that the majority of the relationship is positive, it's healthy, it's supportive, right? It's helping both people grow, right? It's making both, and this is part of like I guess I'm like a person like a little bit of a beef with like there's this a lot of talk in nowadays about like creating safety and safety and safety. And I'm like, yes, safety as a whole, but also there's a little bit fixation on safety. And it's like, to me, it gets back to that whole, even Ben Franklin saying it, will you sacrifice your freedom for security? Will you
Mhm.
sacrifice your happiness for safety? It's like there's a little bit of a fixation for people on feeling safe, as opposed to like, well, growth is not always going to feel safe. Growth is going to be uncomfortable. And if we want to grow as humans, you're not just going to be up, like in your pot, feeling contained and safe. It's like it's got to be a dynamic experience in a relationship. And so I know there's a lot, it's like in the conscious community, it's like there's a lot of, it's like a lot more people are recognizing like, maybe we need to explore more polyamory because people are wanting to explore different phases. Other times there's a fixation on safety. I think both are different experiences that may be temporarily, you know, again, everything is as a process. Like I look at it and I go, look, when you get into a relationship long term, if you understand that two people are coming together that have triggers, traumas, programs, and habits that we either are working towards and creating a home that if someone makes a mistake or the other makes a mistake, there has to be a basis of communication and love and forgiveness as a basis for it. If you don't have that, you're never going to be able to build a future together, no matter, because it's, you know, it's just a matter of time. So this is to say, like, I look at relationship as a dynamic thing, and you can't predict it. You can't tell someone, you know, I'm always going to be there for you. You know, you have to literally be like, I love you. Let's see if we can make this work. And if we commit to, you know, making it work and commit to, you know, listening and hearing and communicating, and, you know, it probably will, but you can't guarantee that. And I know some people that literally be like, you know, I need a guarantee that, you know, you're going to be there, you know, for the next 18 years to, if we're going to raise a child. It's like, that may or may not happen, but you can't know that. And if you can't commit to having, you know, to having children because you're scared someone's going to leave you, you're not going to have a happy, you know, you're never going to have a happy life because you're always going to be afraid that someone's going to leave you. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to, I guess, explain that a lot of this fixation on like making someone feel safe is wrong. Like no one is ever going to make you feel safe. I have to do the work inside of myself. You have to do the work inside of yourself.
Mhm.
And all of us have insecurity. So it's up to each one of us to find that place inside and recognize like, wow, okay, this is the insecurity, this is the fear. And sometimes you have to journal, communicate, do work, do breath work, do, you know, talk, have the communication dialogue with people. But you have to find that place where you are healing your wound and not expecting that someone's just going to make you feel safe and you're going to always feel safe.
I love that you said that because that's what I was picking up on is relationships are not about healing our wounds, if like having the other person heal our wounds, or it's also not about connecting in wounds. It's like when we start to connect in wounds, we literally create a looping cycle of that loop of that wound. Relationships are about reflection. Oh, I didn't know I was like living that wound out still. Okay, I got that information and now I'm going to shift it, and I'm going to shift it in reflection with this person that is showing me what I need to see and vice versa. It's so when we're relying on somebody else, and what I was hearing in that, and this is what I call it's connection through the primal body. It's connection through the chemicals, through the wounding, our programming. It's the matrix, right? But we have the opportunity to experience a relationship multidimensionally where we're always looking to possibilities, we're seeing what's there and always ascending it. And that I really do feel like we're just on the edge of kind of bringing that out and letting go of, right now I think it's exploration, right? It's like people are starting to see where relationships are failing. And so they're like putting something there. It's like, oh, well, if we do this and that won't happen. And well, that's not true, right? The only thing we can't create a whole nother storyline around the solution because the solution is going to be different every single time. And so that place of safety, I feel like was the solution of bringing two people together through their wounds. It's like, well, if they're safe in their wounds, then everything's going to be fine. But that's not true. It's about ascending past the wounds. I think I'm kind of rambling now, but I'll
Not
turn
at
it over
all.
to
Not,
you.
not at all. Not at all. I mean, that's what you're saying is so true as far as the reflection. And again, there is that support that has to be a dance that again you can't really predict what technique, but this is where people get into programs and story, as you said. Like the story is, you know, whatever, like, you know, men are, you know, they're attracted to spread their seeds. So every time that they look at a pretty woman, it's like that's a threat that they're going to go out there and jump that woman. And it's like, well, that's your story, right? I mean, you can say, well, I mean, as a man too, I look and I say that's a good looking guy, you know, that's a good looking girl. Like we can appreciate beauty and transmute some of this, like this deep rooted jealousy and paranoia that's so rampant in our primitive psyche. right, as a collective. And I think where we're moving is, ideally, I think, is beyond jealousy, to be able to, when you tap into a higher frequency of connection, which is again beyond the ego, you actually, it's like, it's the heart experience of heartgasm, you could call it, of like, oh, wow, like you can actually feel like the love or the connection between other people. And actually that warms you. That's why when we watch a movie, it's the same experience. No one sits on a screen and goes, man, I'm so, well, some people I probably do. They're like, oh, I'm so jealous she gets to kiss Brad Pitt, you know? But I'm saying, but like, that's not the point. Like, we're supposed to be there going, I get to feel the experience of those two kissing, right? Or those two loving each other in a story. And that's supposed to, that's empathy.
Mm,
Why don't we activate that in our everyday life? That same level of empathy. That's where we need, that's where we're evolving to, I believe, is that the level of empathy, so that we are just more in like flow. And these two have a connection, and that's a beautiful energy connection. And you can feel the energy. And energy is so powerful. Like, it literally, that's what our Kundalini is, right? It's our chakra system activating and aligning. And so people can connect and have a shared experience. And it can be energy of, of just, again, seeing each other, holding that space together. It can be an embrace, it can be kiss, it can be sexual. They're just different expressions. But it's amazing how we have to start by getting past that jealousy of like, well, if someone gives the energy to someone else, it's taken away from me. No,
mm,
how about when I feel the connection between the two other people, I feel that same wave of energy. Wow, all of us, it's like that rising tide that raises all boats, all of us feeling all of a sudden that, wow, the beauty of people actually connecting at levels of energy of heart, and starting to empathize with each other more readily. That's gonna change the entire dynamics of relationships, of friendships, of society, of communities, right? Where it's no longer this hostility. And like a fundamental problem we have in our world is the disconnection of communities. People, families disconnected, people, why are people homeless? They have no communal support. They've lost that sort of, that family, that tribe, that community that used to exist in smaller cities, and smaller cities or towns, right? Where it's like people knew each other, they were friendly, they were able to, to have some level of emotional support for each other, right?
mm,
Now it's just like everyone, just make it on your own, just go out there and thrive. And there's a great aspect of consciousness that's wanted to explore that individuality. But now I think we're coming back to that place of like, okay, the individuality only takes you so far. If we don't have that experience of community, of empathy, of emotional connection with other people, like what is the point of this experience?
mm. Oh my gosh, where to go with that? So first, I feel like I want to look at the difference between an emotion and a feeling. So for
Mm,
me, emotion is the chemical, right? It's the
mm,
primal body releasing a chemical to basically continue on as and that's more of that primal space. And what I hear
yeah.
you talking about is more of it's like connecting through frequency. It's the purity of a connection, right? And there's not necessarily an emotional response. It's a remembering of I see the divine, it's the namaste, if you will.
Mhm.
And um, and so then what I was feeling into when you were talking about even just like, oh, well, you're looking at that woman and blah, 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 and all the fears come up. I was like, oh, well, there's just like this other level where we can tap in consciously. And it's kind of like what we were just saying before of one's coming from a wound and the other one's coming from a remembering. And it's just that easy. It's like, oh, am I experiencing this through my wound because I'm having an experience of an emotional trigger, or I'm creating a story around it, or am I in the experience of the frequency of recognizing or remembering they have the same energy that I have, or there's a connection between us. And it's two different ways of thinking, but then there's all these layers in between having one experience and the other. And I think that that's kind of how, whether it's a relationship, an intimate relationship, or it's somebody you just saying hi to on the street, it's always the opportunity to recognize, where am I having this experience? And that's how we start to break through the matrix, because that awareness
Hmm.
piece is always there.
Hmm. Exactly. I think that the more I work with like Kundalini yoga, breathwork techniques, different sort of tantric techniques, especially with like just the self pleasure, the connecting the physical body to the energy body, and it's like you become more energy sensitive, and then you realize how I guess as they say, women are obviously already more emotionally attuned, but not necessarily they haven't necessarily evolved feelings just because a woman is emotionally attuned. As we know, oftentimes women will go off the deep end on this and that. Don't necessarily have control of their feeling body, right? So they may, not every woman, but obviously they can overreact to the emotional response because they're just naturally more innately designed that way. But if we, as a woman or a man, to evolve, like we have to evolve our feeling body so that we can then have greater empathy for others that we interact with, the energy that surrounds us, right? So I think that again, like tuning our energy bodies is very important in this phase as we, I believe, are beginning to enter the new age, the new earth, and like a lot of us have been called to be more connected to nature, to maybe be away from big cities, or at least if we are like closer to bodies of water or mountains, or right, to the ground with the earth. That's how we're hopefully tuning into this, to our feeling body, our energy body, so that we can then experience life in a more attuned way,
Mhm.
and less programmed through the devices, the frequencies that are being emitted from, they were from the TV set. Now it's from the computers and the social media. And there's a lot of good information that's come through, obviously, but it's still, they're still kind of running these programs and these stories that may not be aligned with our greater truth and our greater destiny, right? And I think that's kind of where we're getting to a crisis point, I feel, in the collective consciousness, where it's like the stories have kind of run out. They're on repeat, right? Because the broadcast from Hollywood, which has been, at some points was very beautiful and expansive and optimistic, it got ultimately, I think, moved in such a dark, you could say even like satanic, sort of negative nihilistic direction, and to the place now where the stories are just literally on repeat, and you're like, we're you guys can't do any original content. Well, we're scared, we don't want to spend money on original content, let's just bring out another Mad Max or Ghostbusters or whatever we can make or do a sequel to, right? Like there's such a fear is driving it, and that's not creativity can't be fear-based. It has to be coming from a place of love, from curiosity, right, from desire to share. So Hollywood isn't driving anymore, so now it's like, okay, where are the new stories, where are the new stories going to come from? It's like, well, each one of us is going to start to experience and perhaps birth collectively the new stories that we're waiting for.
I think that's already happening. I really see that coming through, where people are really going to that centered space, and uh, kind of starting to live their life from that place of curiosity, and being in the creation and the creator at the same time, where it's like, okay, everything's been done, right? I can either redo something that's already been done, or I can go, because the only way to really be the innovator is to go inside. You have to receive information from outside of the matrix. And I kind of love that that's happening in Hollywood, because we start to create our own reality, and we bring Hollywood into real life. And we do that by tapping into information beyond the matrix, if you will. And I think more and more people are doing that, but it goes back to that thing of, okay, well, we have to have awareness of where we're holding our consciousness. And then we have to have the practice of fine tuning our intuition, or the skills that we use to, I see consciousness as a tool. It's like it's the tool to attuning to the intelligence of source. And that's, the more that we use our tool, the closer we get to that intelligence, and the clearer we understand what it's saying, if you will. And where is I going with that? I don't know, but I feel like I don't know where I was going with it,
That's
but
kind of the beauty of it, right? We don't always know. Like we may have an intuition or inkling, but we have to be more willing to receive and be surprised by the experience. And this is kind of goes to the point of like ending the programs that have been running us in our unconscious mind or our reptilian brains. Then like these like fear-based programs. It's like I have to know where this is going, otherwise I'm insecure, otherwise I'm unsafe, otherwise, I could be, killed or whatever. I can lose my security. So letting go of that, knowing where it's going to just be in the journey, this is I think a big evolution in our consciousness to be able to be more ready to just ready to receive.
I love, it's so funny. The last few days I was doing this, like kind of a universal upgrade through this intelligence of our cells. And what the clearing was actually that you had to know what to do before you took your first step. And it was reversing that, saying, take the first step and you'll be told what to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love that. And that's what I heard you saying. I was like, okay, yeah, it's just take the step, because otherwise, if you're waiting, you're hearing a program. But if you take the step, you're in that abstract frequency where you can connect into the intelligence outside your programming and then act upon that. And I just thought it was so fun.
It's like a kid, you just are walking, you don't know where you're going. And that's what we are kind of. We're like we're children in this new paradigm, I believe. So it's coming back to that, kind of the Christ teachings about the little children receiving the kingdom of heaven. It's like that's where we are. It's like we have to be the child, right? That's just ready to receive and to feel, and not let it doesn't have the program, the stories to override just responded.
I love that. Well, Sean, I feel like, oh my gosh, we had so many amazing nuggets here. But is there something that you feel like you would like to say? And then of course, let everybody know where they can get a hold of you, where they can connect with you, all those amazing things.
Of course, I think the best place is seanstone.info. That's my website. It has links to my social media. It has contact email. It has my documentaries, my books, my films. Yeah, just a whole slew of cool things.
Yeah, I was looking through that and there's tons of fun stuff. So definitely, and we'll put that link in the show notes as well so that you can connect to Sean there. Is there any last minute shout out that you'd like to share with everyone?
Ah. No, I think we covered such a gamut. I love the discussion, the conversation, and I really thank you for having me on and sharing. Say hello to your little kitty back there. Just chill. Very calmly chilling.
She loves it. Well, thank you everyone
Mhm.
for listening. And Sean, this has been an amazing conversation. We hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did. And we will put some information about Sean in the show notes. So definitely connect with him. And until next time, go and live in those possibilities.